Now to our interview tonight. Sheriff Joe Arpaio just announced he is running for Senate in Arizona, a seat that Jeff Flake is leaving after finding himself out of step with Trump supporters there. In a moment, I'll speak to two civil rights experts about Arpaio's record. But first, Arpaio is, of course, a former sheriff who is legally heading to jail after a judge held him in contempt for defying immigration rulings. He was only spared when President Trump intervened with a dramatic lifeline that's only offered to criminals: a pardon.
The reaction to President Trump's decision to pardon former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio continues to pour in.
By issuing a pardon on Friday night to former Sheriff Joe Arpaio, President Trump got Joe Arpaio to confess his guilt by accepting that pardon.
President Trump is facing sharp criticism for granting a pardon to Joe Arpaio.
With me now is Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff, thank you for being here tonight.
So thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You are running for the Senate. And so the first question, given your history, is why should you get a promotion to write laws when you yourself didn't follow court orders?
Well, you know, the court that you're talking about is a misdemeanor, contempt of court. Evidently, a previous judge said that I violated his decision. I'm not going to get into that, but as far as the contempt, it was misdemeanor. Same time you can get for barking dogs, and I won't get into all the facts as to how that trial was conducted and when the Department of Justice went public during the trial, telling all the voters that we were in the election phase, telling reporters that I could get 6 months in prison. So the president, and I never asked for the pardoned me because he knew that this decision was wrong, and I appreciate that pardon, and we'll see what happens in the near future. We have some appeals in process anyway.
Well, Sheriff, you said you won't get into the facts, but I will get into the facts here tonight. Some of the facts that were at issue, as you know, were the tent city that you would house detainees in, which you yourself called a concentration camp. Temperatures up to 136 degrees there. Basically requiring inmates at times to wear pink underwear, apparently to humiliate them, chain gangs. I want to mention your legal case and give you a chance to respond. Ultimately cost over $48 million to the taxpayers. And as you know, the cases involve detaining people without what a judge said were cause, as well as accusations of racial profiling. Do you stand by all of that, or do you think that being held in contempt by a judge shows that some of that for you was over the line?
Well, first of all, we run one of the best jail systems in the country, according to the U.S. Department of Justice and others. When you went through that litany that was put out by an independent newspaper called the Phoenix Times, who doesn't like me, but that's here nor there. So when we go to trial, if there's lawsuits, we won the majority of our lawsuits on how we operate the jails. I'm not going to, let me tell you something. I don't run a Hilton hotel. If they don't like the tents, which were there, I put them up 24 years ago. They don't like the food. They don't like our policies. That's too bad. They violated the law, and that's what it is. So you're going down a litany of what you read in the newspaper, but that's all right.
Well, sir, it's not just what I read in the newspaper, and you said they violated the law. The other issue is you're seeking a promotion, I think we could all agree, and a judge found you violated the law. And so that raises the question of why do you want to go to the Senate and write laws if you wouldn't follow a judge's orders to uphold them?
A judge found me guilty of a misdemeanor, and I'm not going to go into the politics of that.
Let me ask you another important question, because you brought up this unusual but lawful pardon that you received from the president. As you know, when you take a pardon, you're admitting guilt. Why did you take that pardon and admit guilt?
I didn't admit guilt. I said I was not guilty. And I say it today.
But you accepted the pardon, and you know under the law that is an admission of guilt.
No, I don't know about that. You have to talk to the legal scholars about that.
Let me talk to you, and I'll give you, sir, let me talk to you, and I'll give you a chance to respond. Supreme Court verdict v. United States. This is the Supreme Court talking. It's their view that is the law, not anyone's opinion, mine or yours. And they say, quote, a pardon implies guilt and acceptance of a confession of it. Do you understand that that's the legal implication of what you did by accepting that pardon?
The president, I'm not a lawyer, thank God, but the president can make any decision he wants on a pardon. And I'm not going to argue about what your decision is. I'm sure his lawyers have reviewed it.
Well, sir, but let's not hide behind lawyers. This is pretty basic. I think the viewers can exactly understand what's going on. If someone, I'm not even going to say you, but if someone were offered a pardon for a murder they didn't commit, their first response might be, I didn't do it. I don't need a pardon for that murder. You do understand, under Supreme Court law, and as a sheriff, you may not be a lawyer, but you are obligated to uphold the law, and you're running for the Senate now to write the laws, that's what that means, and you accepted that pardon.
This is I'm not going to get into the law again. This was a misdemeanor, the same as a barking dog as far as the time is concerned. A contempt of court, which was very unusual to begin with. So I'm not going to argue that. I'm telling you that I'm not guilty of that. I believe we were doing some type of appeal on that pardon. We're not appealing a pardon, but we're doing an appeal on somewhat on the conviction. I was found guilty by a judge who refused to give me a jury trial, and announced my guilty verdict on a misdemeanor without even taking me into court. I had to hear about it in the media. So there's a lot of other things.
Do you understand how that sounds, sir?
Yes,
and I want to give you a chance to respond. But do you understand that when you come here and you talk about the due process rights that you feel you may not have been afforded, you just said you didn't like the way you found out about it from the judge. But at the beginning of this discussion, you came on here and said tough if these detainees, who, by the way, some of them had not been convicted of anything or held in contempt of anything, unlike yourself, you said tough. Do you see how that's an issue if you want to be a senator and people have to assess the record? That it sounds a little bit like you want differential treatment, sir?
Well, come on, that's not true. What do you mean I use the word tough, so what? So I have been tough on crime for 58 years. I never had any problems.
But you didn't like it when the judge is tough on you, you're saying?
Well, what do you mean tough on me? I don't like the way the trial occurred, but I'm not going to get, you know what? I don't want to talk about that because we're still in an appeal process.
Understood.
So
I have to put one more fact on the record, sir, and then I will move on to other topics. This is not the only thing you're on for, but we have to go through the facts and the receipts. That's something we do here. You mentioned the appeal, but it was a senior federal judge, Susan Bolton, in your case, who said, quote, the pardon undoubtedly spared defendant, that's you, any punishment that might otherwise have been imposed, but it did not revise the historical facts of this case. So you do understand this is the finding, this is the contempt. This is, I guess the final question on this before we move on is why should voters put this to the side when they think about whether to promote you to the Senate?
Well, let me just say this. This isn't an appeal. You know, you have a right to appeal judges' rulings.
Yes, sir.
I guess you understand that.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, it's under the Ninth Circuit. But it's under appeal, what you just said, and we're going to leave it at that.
Okay.
I'm not going to keep trying the case on television.
And Sheriff, the other big news tonight is a Democratic source on Capitol Hill quoting the president, and the White House not denying this at this hour, saying that President Trump, in discussing immigration, said that people from Latin American and African countries those are basically S-hole countries, and he would prefer immigration more from places like Scandinavia. Do you agree with that, or do you find that kind of language counterproductive to immigration reform?
I'm not going to listen. First of all, I served as a head of the federal drug enforcement in Latin America, Mexico, Turkey. I can go on and on. So I understand a little about the countries he's talking about. But whatever he says, that's him. He says it. I'm not going to question what he says.
You're not going to question under any circumstances what the president says? Is that how you approach President Obama? I mean, why would you, if you were to go in the Senate and represent Arizona, why would you say you'll never question what a president says?
Well, I'm not in the Senate now. So,
but that's the job you're running for, sir. That's why you're on tonight. You're a Senate candidate. We're trying to get a sense, I think, of what kind of leader you would be. And the president is saying people from those countries, those are S-hole countries. Is that good or not? Can you give a straight answer?
No, I don't know. How do you know he said that? Is that what he said? Someone heard him say that? Or did you read that in some book? I presume you got that from a book. Am I correct on that?
You want to
believe
you are incorrect in that instance,
right?
but I understand the larger point you're making, which is a fair one to the press. You're saying, how do we know? As I mentioned at the top, it's a Democratic source that he said it in a meeting, the White House not denying it. I suppose if you want to say in your answer if he said it, but what's your position? And then I'm going to take a break.
I don't have a position. Listen to everybody talking on radio, making bad remarks and so on. It seems like everybody does it anyway. But I don't know if he said it, and I'm not going to read his mind. I support him regardless of what he says.
Sheriff Arpaio, I appreciate you taking time during your Senate bid to come on to speak directly. Dialogue's important, and I appreciate your time, sir.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.